So you had no plans on doing comedy?
No plans. I had a small business going in New York that was doing pretty well. I had a daughter. I had a woman I was living with, and comedy threw a monkey wrench into two of those three things. So
yeah,
still got that daughter.
Now, broadcasting live from the Podcast Palace on Park Street in beautiful and dangerous Clearwater, Florida, it's the Comedians Uncorked podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Gaud and Pat Largo.
Comedians Uncorked podcast, and a special thank you to Julie Drolshagen of Century 21, our studio sponsor. You can reach Julie at 727-902-9233 or get her at floridabeachbusiness.com. Julie Drolshagen. Hey, so we got from New York. Actually, he lives in Florida now. We have another great touring comedian in our studio. I love having people in studio. Mr. Kenny Garcia. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
This is great. Happy, healthy New Year to you. 2022 already.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're pretty deep into January, so we're still doing Happy New Year's.
I always give it a window because I'm older now and I live in Florida. I know. I give it a window all the way through January 31st just in case I haven't seen people.
Welcome to Florida, Kitty.
Fair enough.
Well, welcome to Florida.
All right, I'm with it. I just want to get on the same page.
It's a slower lifestyle here.
So how are you enjoying the Florida winter?
Quite honestly, I'm in love with Florida and everything Florida. We just got back from Chicago a couple of days ago, which was real winter. Mm-hmm. But it was like kind of like, I like layering up. I'm born and raised in New York City. So I've been like, I like wearing a hoodie and I like an extra jacket. So I've been appreciative that it's like not nonstop heat down here. So I like the Florida winters. I'm appreciative of it. I like seasons changing.
Yeah. And give a shout. What borough in New York? Give a shout out.
So I'm born and raised in the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Okay.
And then I lived in Brooklyn for the last 20 years before coming out here.
Nice. Wow. So you started comedy up in New York.
I started comedy in New York. I have a pretty good class that I started with. I started with like Michael Che and Pete Davidson, and I'm like a couple of years behind like Sam Morril and Mark Norman and those guys.
Wow.
So it was like Mike Vecchione. Like it was a pretty tough, way to come up. But it makes you stronger. So.
Of that group, who's the weakest? I have my name already.
Yeah, probably me.
No.
Seems pretty obvious.
You don't want to call nobody out.
I don't want to call. I had a name. I'm not going to say just because we're all professionals here. So I
like name calling. I'm not afraid to name call. I mean, I have my favorites, and I like the guys that I don't like. But that's the beauty of comedy. Comedy is subjective, and the only objective thing are the guys who are selling tickets. So
That's true.
So
who influenced you coming up? Like, who was you watching before you got into it?
Well, I was a kid who didn't even really know that I thought there were only 6 comedians in the world when I was growing up. I thought it was like Eddie Murphy, George Carlin, Richard Pryor, like the guys that I would see on HBO. I didn't know there was like Tampa Improv. I thought it was just doing comedy on TV. And then when I was like 19, 20, I went to a comedy club for the very first time, and I saw like Richard Lewis and DC Benny.
Yeah.
And then I just like never went to another comedy club again for like another 10 years. There was just so many other things to do in New York growing up.
Sure.
And when I went with a buddy of mine, and I was like, oh, these guys are like, this is fun. This is cool. This is an interesting thing to do. And a buddy of mine wanted to try it, and we just went to an open mic and did well. And I started comedy when I was 31 years old, so I was a little bit older.
Wow. I mean, I started late too.
Yeah, it has its advantages and disadvantages when you start so late. But that's the way life is. I'm happy with the road it's given me. So here we are where we are. So
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding, man.
You started late too. How old were you when you started?
I started. I was 29.
Yeah.
I was just about to turn 30.
Damn.
A few months later. Yeah. So
I was 37. Because I was in radio for years.
Yeah, I could tell with that voice.
Right, you got the radio voice?
And a face, too. Radio
I got
face.
the red.
Radio
I
face
do. I'm not as tan as I used to be. Pretty. But yeah, December 7th, 2007. Yeah. Pearl Harbor. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All downhill from there.
Dude, it was crazy. Yeah. Well, and I was like, I mean, in radio, and you know this, Tony, from the guys I used to work with. I mean, one of my buddies is Largo, the cable guy, and we did radio in Orlando together years ago, and Clear Channel. And when I used to interview comics, if I was a radio interview right now, I would never try to be funny. I would just ask you the questions. You be funny because that's what you do. I would never want to be that guy. But I always studied the comics. I loved what they do. I'm like, how do they get on stage and talk to strangers? What's the opening line? How are they so funny? And Larry put it succinctly to me one day. We were playing basketball at his house in Sanford, Florida. He goes, dude, you write jokes, you do stuff on radio that's funny, you make me laugh. He goes, you just got to get on stage. And that's what took me another almost 10 years after him saying that for me to get the guts to finally do it. So I'm glad I did, but 37 was probably a little too
Yeah.
late.
Well, I mean, what got you up there though? I mean, was it something like, well, I could do that. It looks fun and I could do it.
Well, a friend of mine was in the long story. I'm trying to make it short. A friend of mine was writing comedy films. He was in film school. He's a lot younger than I was. Also playing basketball. So funny how basketball is the conduit to us doing comedy. I played basketball with him. Do you guys know Peter Vesey?
Peter Vesey.
I don't even know what conduit means.
Fair enough. It's
Okay.
a bird.
Okay. Peter Vesey sounds very familiar. Yeah, Peter Vesey, he was a sports.
He's a sports writer.
guy,
So I
yes,
used to play
yeah.
basketball with his son.
Oh, wow.
And he was in film school. I was helping to edit some of his film scripts, and I just had a natural knack for making them a little bit funnier. And then him and I started collaborating on them, and then he was like, hey, I want to try to do stand-up. And so we went together. And I didn't know, again, I was very ignorant to like what was going on, and I didn't realize this was the whole world.
Yeah.
So we went together, we went to an open mic, and then like as most people, you're like, I'm way funnier than all of these dudes. And then that was what got us into it. And then I fell in love with it. It became like a drug. Like all of us have, succumbed to this drug of comedy.
So you had no plans on doing comedy?
No plans. I had a small business going in New York that was doing pretty well. I had a daughter. I had a woman I was living with, and comedy threw a monkey wrench into two of those three things. So
Yeah.
still got that daughter.
Hey.
2 out of 3 ain't
Right.
bad.
Yeah,
That's
2 out of 3.
That's the one to keep. That's the one to
So-
keep.
So now, you were starting out in the scene up in New York.
Yeah.
Now, what became your home club up there?
Well, New York Comedy Club and Gotham Comedy Club were the first two that I did a couple of their bringer shows. And then there was another club that ended up closing, which was like really, really key to helping me get a lot. It was a place called the Laugh Lounge.
I've been there.
Yeah, they closed like probably 2 or 3 years into me doing comedy, but like they just gave me so much stage time because I was like Hispanic. I was from that area.
I went up there, and that was one of the rooms that I got to do time in.
Yeah, it was a perfect comedy club. Like they had a really great bar upstairs, and then they had a really good room downstairs, and it was just like so much fun. And I can remember just having some really, really great times down there, meeting like pretty much all of my friends down there. So it was pretty cool.
That is all perfect. Yeah.
It was a good time.
And you see, watching you guys, your facial expressions just talk about going up on stage in New York City. That's the magic area right there. It's great places around the country, around the world to perform. But when you're just watching you guys see how excited you were, just talking about, especially starting out there in New York City, there's nothing like performing.
Yeah,
in
like New York is a weird animal in that, like, when you're a comedian, one of the things you have to learn to do really quickly is, you have to learn to grab people's attention. Mm-hmm. And attention spans are short in New York. It's not the best place to perform, because it's not fun to be competing all the time. It takes a lot of energy. But they are appreciative of, like, really good art. They're seeing so many different kinds of art. And that's one of the things that I think, like, New York taught me how to just have, like, a sheet of armor on.
Yeah.
And I think when you go around the country telling jokes, you're not going to appeal to everyone, but at the very least, they're unable to affect you because you have a really nice coat of armor that you built up in New York. Mm-hmm. And also in New York, you got to appeal to everybody. There's like so many, and that if you're trying to do this, you can market yourself to one little market of a crowd, if you will.
Yeah.
But you want to kind of be broad, and you want to make everybody laugh. And New York is a really great place to learn how to do that. And then there's obviously so much stage time in New York, and everybody's really good there. And you don't want to be left behind. So I think most men tend to be competitive.
Yeah.
So you want to compete.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah,
You just feel that just naturally among so many comics. Up
Yeah.
there.
So we're always competing, and you want to be funnier than the next guy. And then, Then you get into the little traps that I think, we all comedians get into where it's like, oh, I'm funnier than that guy. Why is he getting that?
Right.
So, but, on stage when it's just like you see your friend go on before you, you got your friends going on after you. It's like a nice little competitive little thing. And
Yeah, just busting balls.
yeah, just
like
busting
that.
balls
Yeah.
and doing what comics like to do.
And I'm curious, especially up in New York, and this could be anywhere geographically, but what did you ever have a night, either when you were starting or even now, where you're a typical night where you've got big name comedians maybe going up any given night, especially in New York, right?
Yeah.
And you watch them and you got your stuff. Did you ever have one of those nights where you go, I don't know why I'm doing this. Like these
Yeah, for
guys
sure.
and girls are really, I'm just like, I'm good, but I'm really thinking maybe why am I doing this? Did you ever have that?
Yeah, many nights like that. And like, it makes you better.
Yeah.
I can remember a night in particular where I was with some friends of mine, and we're all like feature levels, and it's like a showcase show. It's like 40 people in the room, and we're all having, like, we all think we're having the greatest sets of our lives, like one after the other. And then Gary Goldman was on the show. He was closing the show, and the room was hot, and he did something to the room that made us all feel like we should not be doing what we're doing. Like the sound went, what we thought was a 10 was really a 4.
Wow.
And he took it to like a 10.
Oh, wow.
And like, it was jarring in that
Yeah.
like, you were like, holy shit, I just had the best set of my life. I killed. And then it's like, oh, there's 2 other sounds above what I was able to do.
Above killing, right?
Suddenly,
above-
my life doesn't matter.
And it
Right.
was really like jarring.
Yeah.
And like kind of like, it really like pushed on like, oh my gosh, like, can I get that kind of good? And it was like, again, it was like no cursing. It was like just super smart, super funny stuff. He took
Yeah.
a hot room and obliterated it.
And you say this is Gary Goldman, the tall guy, the
Yeah,
6'6"?
yeah,
Yeah, he's clean.
Yeah.
What a great writer.
Oh, yeah.
He's amazing. He's like
And,
one of my favorite comedians.
I love
and
him. I do,
probably
yeah.
like underappreciated, but he just, and like that happens a lot in New York.
Yeah.
Where I think sound as a comedian is a very important thing to us. We know what our jokes, when we kind of get them to a place where we feel super comfortable with them, we know what they're supposed to sound like in the room. And then you get your stuff to a place, and then someone else comes into the room, and you're like, oh, it's not gonna get better than that. And then they take that sound to another level.
Yeah.
It's really like, because that's what we're all looking for. We
Yeah.
want that sound. That's the sound that's coming
Yeah.
back to us.
It's a 40-foot wave.
Yeah.
you
So.
know?
And that external reinforcement, that's our life source, right?
That's how we know. That's our Superman sun. That's
Right.
where we go to get reinvigorated.
Yeah,
That's what's
yeah.
getting us back.
That's a
to-
great story.
Well, let me ask you about this. Speaking of Gary Goldman and writing, like, what is your process? I mean, I know you work stuff out on stage all the time, but
Yeah.
do you lay things out first? Is there an outline, or do you write things up?
Yeah. So I have a lot of bad habits as a comedian. I do like to take a premise and just flush it out on stage. I'm fortunate enough that like I get to work a lot, and I'm on the road enough, and I have the time and the space to like work it out in a big room.
Yeah.
And I work with people that aren't afraid to like let me fail, and they kind of like, we encourage each other that way. But I think I'm at my best when I am a little bit more focused, and I take a premise that I have written out a bit on stage, write it out after I've already said it a couple of times on stage, and then when I'm sitting and writing it out word for word, I'll find a nice little funniness inside of it again, and then I'll take that. I try not to memorize it, because when I go on stage, I want it to feel like, I want every crowd to feel like I'm telling this to them for the very first time.
It's fresh.
And so, that I just thought of it, and that's kind of the way I like to present material. So I try not to ever memorize anything, and writing it down, it's just going to kind of get sunk into your brain as memory. So then what I try to do is I try to take what I've written down and just bring out the little key points. And then eventually it gets to a place where it's just, I can say it verbatim. And then
Yeah.
it's just performing it so that it doesn't sound like I've memorized it. And so that's kind of like my process. It's just kind of write it on stage, and then write it out word for word at home to just try to find extra funny stuff, and then take that back on stage.
So you'll start out on stage with it.
Wow.
Yeah, I usually like to start out on stage. So like I'll have a premise that like I'll put into my phone, and it's very vague. It'll
Yeah.
be like why I'm looking in the mirror when I put deodorant on or some shit
Like a
like
bullet point.
Yeah, a little bullet point, and then because I'm very conversational, so I wanted to feel conversational when I'm on stage. I wanted to feel like my whole thing on stage is I wanted to feel like the crowd thinks we're having a conversation, and I'm just not letting them talk.
Right.
Yes.
And so like that's kind of like what's most important to me.
Yeah.
Like they feel like they're a part of like almost like they're hearing me talk to a friend in a barbershop or
Right. They're on the outside, just kind of
Yeah.
hanging out, watching you just talk about something.
Yeah,
or listening
but
to
they
you.
do feel like
Right.
I'm a fly on the wall in
Yeah.
a conversation.
Yeah, they
so.
feel involved.
Yeah,
in
they,
it.
they feel involved, but they don't necessarily have the agency to chime in or talk.
Yeah.
And when you, cause it's pretty brave like to do that, to be able to take a concept, go conceptually, Now, is this something you even think of, almost improv on, like a thought maybe that pop into your head on stage, not even pre anything, like you
Well,
just
that's mostly
think
like a tag, but I won't ever just go up completely naked. I'll
Okay.
go up with like a starting point.
Okay.
And I also won't ever go up. I'm a little afraid on stage.
Sure.
I do well on stage, and I'm like, I want to make sure I always do well. So I'm a little afraid to like really fall flat on my face. I'm not like super courageous on stage where I'm like, so I know I have all the savers and all that stuff. I've been doing this long enough.
Right.
But I won't ever bring up like a blanket naked premise and then not be able to follow it with like stuff I know works. So like
Right.
I kind of will like throw it up in the beginning, do something to get them to build up some equity with the crowd to let them know that I'm funny, then bring in something new, and then follow it up with something that I know that already works. So I kind of like to
Right.
like sprinkle things in.
Yeah.
And so, again, like that's where it's not super courageous, but it's just me having the luxury of the time on stage to be able to bring a couple of new things on stage whenever I would like. And so actually, like speaking of all of this is actually a pretty interesting place that I'm coming into. I'm recording an album in February.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was
Congratulations.
going to ask
Thank
you
you.
about that. Yeah.
And like it's gonna be the first time in my career where like when I'm done with the material, I work on the road a lot with a comedian. His name is Josh Wolf,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we tour a lot together. And I promised him, I was like, hey, when I get done with this album, I'm not gonna do any of that material. And the first show we do together, I'm gonna go up completely naked with no material.
Oh man.
And so he was like, whoa, this is gonna be exciting.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
and we're both very much. I'm scared to death of it, but I'm also like really intrigued. Like I have some stuff that I've been writing, but what I've been really concentrating on is like tightening up the hour so that it looks really great for the album. But I'm also like I have like 4 or 5 little bits and like things that I would like to talk about. So I'll bring those up afterwards.
So you're going to start off like completely new, just with a handful of premises.
That's what I'm trying to do, and I'm curious to see how long that'll last because I am competitive.
Yeah.
And I like doing well on stage, and it feels good to do well on stage. And I'm really proud of this last little hour that I have. It's probably the best work that I've ever done, and I know what it sounds like, and I get used to the sounds, and you get used to the adulations of like what happens after you do it. And now I'm starting over, and I'm like scared to death, and
So-
it's fun.
It is. I know what you're talking about, and I think the hardest part is just the psychology of it, like you were talking about, because you know when your stuff works, you're gonna get the laughs.
I know where I'm gonna get
you
them.
expect it.
I know what they sound like. I know what it feels like. I know the stuff afterwards. I know that a way that I like to walk out of the club afterwards. Head held high.
So then you're gonna go. So basically, here's what you're doing. This is basically you're going from the Gary Goldman 10
I don't know about
To
that,
the-
but the
to
Kenny
the-
Garcia 10
to the Kenny Garcia 10
to 0.
let's be honest.
No, that's a 0 right
no, it's
now.
not gonna go to 0 because
I'll
you're gonna
get
say
laughs.
something.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be about 3 or 4.
Yeah,
maybe?
somewhere in there. And
See, you don't want that feeling again.
well, what's funny to me is one of the things that like when you do this long enough, you know this. So after the shows, we want to sell merch. So now merch is selling really, really well for me because it's like the Kenny Garcia 10.
You're gonna
So
kill your set. You're
In
gonna
my
kill
head,
your
I'm like,
merch.
man, not only am I not going to get jokes, I'm not going to be able to sell this merch
You have
after
some,
the show.
you're gonna have supply chain issues.
You gotta lower the price from the Kenny Garcia 10 to about maybe a 2 or 3 to
Yeah,
get the.
so
Well, I got a two-parter. So when you're opening up for anyone, if it's Theo or say you're working with Josh, how much time with stuff now do you do from start to finish? What
So I don't know how this has happened for me. Like Tony's been on a lot of these shows, but when I go on the road with these guys, they like to just do 2-person shows with me. I'm really good with the crowd, and like I'm very chatty. So like they've kind of, and it works out great. I get a little bit extra money.
Yeah.
So like they'll have me do 30, 35 minutes in front of them.
Okay.
And I'm also fortunate enough, I don't like to toot my own horn, but I think I'm really funny. And I've run into this issue before where I've worked with some headliners that you get a little too funny for.
Oh yeah.
And they like, they don't want to work with you. And I've had to stop working with a couple of guys. I'm happy to name names. And
oh man,
and
right here on the Comedians on Court podcast.
And I work with Josh, and Josh has this really great philosophy. Like he's like iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
And he likes it. I'm good in front of him. And
Good.
I work with Theo. Theo likes that I'm good in front of him. I work with another guy, Chris Porter, who likes that
Porter.
he likes that I'm good in front of him.
Good.
I got a Porter story.
Yeah, and so like and then I've worked with other guys who were like, hey, can you do a little less time? Hey,
And who would they be?
I'll name names. You want me to name some names? There's been a bunch of people.
We can edit if we need. I don't think we're going to edit, but I'm just saying we always have the power to.
I've worked with a guy, Drew Lynch, who had a lot of trouble with me in front. Do you know him?
I've never worked with him, but I've heard stories.
Oh really?
And then there's another guy, T.K. Kirkland, had a little bit of did not like Ari Spears. Has been another.
No,
guy.
oh, I know. Okay, okay.
So and it always surprises me. Like
Man.
they're paying to come see these guys. Ian Bagg has been another guy.
Really?
Who's had a little bit of.
What has he got to worry about?
He didn't. It was weird. He just was like, I don't know what they have to worry about. They're just maybe it's New York
You think
thing.
it's a different style or something?
I don't know what it is, but it's always jarred me. It's like, dude, people are paying to see you. They don't care about me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I'm
what-
the opening band. What
what's
are you
the
worried
point?
about?
Why wouldn't you want me to be funny?
I'll tell you a
Yeah.
quick story. I work with Bobby Collins from L.A. and
I love Bobby.
Yeah,
Collins.
I work with him at Snappers in Palm Harbor here. Shout out to them. It's my home club. I love Snappers here in Palm Harbor, and they just wanted me to work with him, no host, and I did. I very respectful. I picked him up from the airport. I never picked up a comedian before, even when I was in radio. Nothing to do. I never picked. You used to pick up yours. I picked him up from Tampa International. Mr. Collins, how are you? It's Bobby. Oh, okay, but were you from New York?
Bobby,
Yeah.
by the way, also a very good basketball player that I've played basketball with.
Well,
Really?
he mentioned a lot of New York basketball. We were talking about that because we were talking about watching basketball in town and stuff like that. So I get to work with him, open with him, 5 shows, and I'm supposed to host and open, but I'll give you the whole story within the story. So then he comes off after the first night. He goes, "Don't worry about the hosting stuff too much." He goes, "Your material's good. Just do your material." So the next couple of shows, I just did 30 minutes. He let me do 25 up to 30 because I asked him respectfully. He goes, "Do your thing." It killed it good. He goes, "Pretty good, huh? It worked out well to just do material." I go, "Yeah, thanks." I just felt elated, man.
I mean, there's a lot of insecurity in this business.
Sure.
There's a lot of. So it's nice to finally be around people that are secure.
Yeah.
And are
Hey,
supportive.
well, you're working with some big names right now.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. Like I've had a good string of. I don't like to call it luck, because it takes away your own agency. I think of it as like just fortunate. A lot of people like to use cliches. I like cliches as well. So that, you'll say, "Oh, you got to be in the right place at the right time," and I don't necessarily. I think that's only half true.
Yeah.
I think you got to be ready when you're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, preparation.
So
Exactly.
I've always been ready, and so like Will Smith has a great quote. He's like, "If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready."
Yeah.
So I stay ready, and so I'm always ready.
Well, let me ask you this, just to follow up on that, because this has happened to me. I thought I was ready for a moment, and I was not,
Ooh,
and it shook me.
here we go.
It was a TV thing too.
There we
It was
go,
a
all right.
big moment, and it got me. It shook me, and I screwed it up. Has something like that happened to you, or have you always felt like you were, even when you weren't completely confident, you still made the moment?
No, like I think I've like turned down stuff I probably shouldn't have turned down.
Right.
Like looking back, like similar to like Bobby's situation, because I like integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And like money comes and goes, but you got to like live with yourself every day. So I've done things on principle looking back, but nothing where like I'm a pretty confident person, and like so no moment has ever been like too big for me. but just maybe making not irrational, maybe just putting too much thought. Because, in this business, some opportunities don't come back a second time, and I think that I've turned down things that I probably should have just taken for the money or for just because it might have opened up another door. Or maybe like having a little too much pride, and like, and be like, nah, no, 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 I'm not gonna do that. Like, and maybe something like that. But they've been very far and few between in the grand scheme of things. Like, all in all, like, I don't have any regrets in this business. Like, I feel like there's really no one out there that could be like, oh, Kenny's an asshole. I don't know if I can curse on this, but
You can.
Yeah.
so I feel really comfortable with all of that stuff, but mostly just personal things of being like, you get presented an opportunity. And I think this is a kind of business where you probably should say yes to 99% of the things. And I've been doing this for almost 13 years now, and I've probably said yes to like 90% of the things. And I think that last little 9% of things I probably should have just said yes to. So.
Well, there's a natural circumspection in life where you're sometimes people are just a little wary, not just in entertainment. Anyway, stocks and stuff. You put,
Yeah.
Give us some of your money. We're going to put this in this hot stock. Like, then what do people say like 10 years later?
I
wish I did that Walmart stock when it was $10. Now it's $150 a share. I'm like, damn it. But I mean, it's natural. But I mean, like, do you see yourself doing like getting yourself like for big time show opportunities down the road though? Like, are you looking at like say a Kimmel or Fallon, stuff like that?
I mean, I'm always open to those things. I think the world has kind of like moved away from like the things that I'm trying to do on stage, and like having that be on Kimmel and Fallon and stuff like that. But I'm always open to it. I think for me personally, I'm just grateful to be having this weird job. I don't really feel like I have a job. I get to travel the country. I really enjoy it. I have a very nomadic personality, so it works really well for me. And if I can just continue to keep working, hopefully put out a really cool album, maybe get people that want to buy tickets to a show after hearing the album, like that's just kind of all I'm looking for, and kind of building up an old school kind of audience that way.
Have you noticed doing stuff live, but especially working with the people you're working with? I'm sure everyone can shut it down, but have you noticed a difference in the audience, in live audiences, chatty, talking to you, heckling? Have you had any problems especially in the recent past? It's just things have been getting a little bit different now that I notice.
Well, one of the things that I do notice going around the country is that people are more excited to be out.
Yeah.
But in terms of like heckling, I never really deal with that. Like I think Tony has a very similar personality on stage, where it's just like, hey, I don't want to talk to that guy. That guy looks like he could cut me down pretty easily, and so people tend to not want to chat with me.
That's cool.
And but the audiences have been great. I think people are really excited to be out in a post-COVID world. They're appreciative when we come to the town, and they're appreciative that we put on a good show. And I think that like, they're getting that energy in return from us. And I think, but more than anything, I'm appreciative of their energy. Like, I'm just excited to be out working again. And it was a long couple of months in that COVID world. So
that's cool, man. Yeah. Well, let's close it out by finding out, what do you see happening in the future, man? What's the big vision?
For me personally, well, for me, like I'm recording an album, and I'm doing a special with the same label, Helium Records.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
And I don't really put myself out there a lot on social media. I just like doing comedy.
Are you just doing a recorded?
So I'm doing both.
Are you doing are you like a?
Yeah, so we're doing a half-hour special for video, and then we're doing an hour album. And I just want to I'm really proud of this work, and I think it's like super funny and like really unique. I think Tony's seen some of the material. It's like really fun, unique stories.
Yeah. That's gonna be a solid special.
Thank you. And I just like that my stuff is unique and no one really can touch on that stuff. It's very personal and fun. And it's kind of fucked up.
Okay, good.
And I think it's really cool, and I'm really people really seem to like it, and I'm just really proud of it, and I just hope it does really well and people want to share it and people get excited about what I'm doing next. because I'm kind of excited about what I'm doing next. So
Good, and that's what we like to hear. Now, and can you give us the name of the album and when it's coming out, or is that?
so no. I don't know the release date yet because we
Okay.
haven't recorded, but I do have a name for it. I'm
Yes.
actually really excited about it. It's going to be called Non-Essential Worker.
Yes, good.
Ah, yes.
So that's me.
I love that title, man.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right on, dude.
So that's me, non-essential worker. It was a big play because a lot of the album is like how we survived like COVID and the pandemic and stuff like that. So
That's great because I always said about, especially in this country, and we've been talking about it briefly. I said how, especially nowadays, it's anti-bullying. You don't put labels on people. You let them be who they want. And then once COVID hit, you're essential. You could go to work.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
not.
yeah.
You stay home. And
That's
I'm like,
hilarious.
oh, they
Yeah,
just
man.
bullied us. I'm so happy you named it that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
now you said you're going to be recording this next month in
I'm
February?
recording it in February, and
Okay.
then I don't know when they're releasing it, but
Where are you
Okay.
recording it at?
at Charlie Goodnights.
Charlie Goodnights,
Raleigh, North Carolina.
North
Okay, cool.
Carolina. Cool. Okay, so if
Yeah,
people
yeah.
want to go, they can
Yeah,
get
yeah.
tickets for that. That'd
Yeah,
be
yeah.
cool.
It'll
yeah.
be. We're recording it February 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Okay, I know you said you don't do much social, but how can people follow this to when it comes out? Like, are
Yeah,
you,
I'm on
give us-
I'm on Instagram and I have a
Okay.
website. It's all really easy. Just I am Kenny Garcia, all one word.
Right on.
Twitter's I am Kenny Garcia, Instagram and the Facebook I am Kenny Garcia. So
That's so cool, man.
nice and easy.
Kenny, listen, man. Thanks for being on the Comedians Uncorked podcast
It's
with
my
us.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we're glad you're a Floridian now, but I can't wait to see the stuff when it comes out. And hopefully we'll have you come on when it comes out and
I'd love
drops.
to. Yeah, I would
and
love
we'll,
that.
we'll do a follow-up. So
That'd be
much
great.
luck to you, and you can come on anytime you want. Thank you so much for being on with
Thanks
us.
for having me. I appreciate
a
it. You
lot,
guys got
brother.
a good gig here.
Thanks
It's cool.
a lot.
Thanks, man.
Peace.
That's good stuff. Thank you.
You're putting up with the Comedians Uncorked podcast, live from the Sunshine State, Florida.
Don't forget to check out our Comedians Uncorked YouTube channel and just click on that subscribe button. Thanks.